You were born wearing a number. You cannot see it. You cannot feel it. But it is written into every single cell of your body, and it was decided long before you existed by a force that has been shaping your ancestors for 200,000 years. That number is your melanin level. And the story of how it got there is one of the strangest, most precise survival stories in the history of our species. Start here. Go back far enough, and every human on Earth had the same skin. Dark, deeply pigmented, rich with melanin. Not because of culture, not because of geography and the way we think about it today, but because of the sun. And more specifically, because of what the sun does to something your survival depends on completely. Your skin is not just a covering, it is a shield, a temperature regulator, a vitamin factory, and a chemical processor all running simultaneously. And for the first humans walking across equatorial Africa under one of the most intense ultraviolet radiation environments on the planet, that shield needed to be strong. Here's what melanin actually does. Melanin is a biological pigment produced by cells called melanocytes, and it absorbs ultraviolet radiation before it can penetrate deep into your skin and damage your DNA. Anthropologist Nina Jablonski, who has spent decades studying the evolution of human skin color, describes melanin as a natural sunscreen built directly into the body. The darker your skin, the more melanin you carry, and the more protection you have against UV radiation burning through your outer layers and causing the kind of cellular damage that leads to mutation. For humans living near the equator 200,000 years ago, high melanin was not optional. It was the difference between surviving long enough to reproduce and dying of radiation-related illness before you could pass anything on. Evolution is not sentimental. It does not care about you personally. It only cares about what works long enough to make more of you. So dark skin was selected for, heavily, consistently, for hundreds of thousands of years. But then something happened. Your ancestors started moving. Not all at once, not with any plan. But slowly, over tens of thousands of years, populations of humans began migrating out of Africa, pressing north through the Middle East, across Europe, into Central Asia, eventually reaching every corner of the planet. And as they moved, something critical changed. The sun got weaker, not literally. But the angle of sunlight hitting the Earth at higher latitudes means the ultraviolet radiation is spread across a wider area, filtered through more atmosphere, arriving with far less intensity than at the equator. The further north your ancestors traveled, the less UV radiation their skin was exposed to every day. And here's where the story takes a turn that most people never consider. The same UV radiation that your melanin was protecting you against is also the trigger for something your body desperately needs: vitamin D. When ultraviolet B radiation from the sun hits your skin, it triggers a chemical reaction that converts a molecule in your skin into provitamin D3, which your liver and kidneys then convert into the active form your body uses. Researcher Michael Hollick at Boston University has spent decades documenting how fundamental vitamin D is to human health. It regulates calcium absorption. It supports immune function. It plays a role in bone density, mood regulation, and cardiovascular health. Without enough of it, things go seriously wrong. And here's the problem your dark-skinned ancestors faced as they moved north. Their melanin, which had been keeping them alive under the African sun, was now blocking the very UV radiation they needed to produce enough vitamin D. In low UV environments, high melanin became a disadvantage. Not because it was doing something wrong, but because it was doing exactly what it had always done in a place where the rules had changed. So evolution began to quietly negotiate. In populations that settled in Northern Europe and other high-latitude regions, individuals with slightly less melanin were able to produce more vitamin D in the weaker sunlight available. Over many generations, lower melanin levels were selected for in those populations. Not overnight, not by design. But because the people who could extract enough vitamin D from weak northern sunlight survived healthier pregnancies, grew stronger bones, fought off infections more effectively, and passed their genes on more successfully than those who could not. This is what Nina Jablonski and her colleague George Chaplin confirmed when they mapped global skin color data against UV radiation levels across the planet. The correlation was almost perfectly precise. The closer a population's ancestral homeland to the equator, the darker the average skin color. The further from the equator, the lighter. The skin color map of the world is essentially a map of ancient ultraviolet radiation levels drawn in human biology. Your skin color is not random. It is not decoration. It is a very precise evolutionary solution to a very specific environmental equation. But the story is not finished yet, because melanin does something else. Something that adds another layer to this already extraordinary balancing act. Melanin protects folate. Folate, also called vitamin B9, is a nutrient that is absolutely critical for DNA synthesis and cell division, particularly in early fetal development. UV radiation destroys folate in the bloodstream, and without adequate folate, the consequences during pregnancy are severe. Neural tube defects, miscarriage, developmental problems. Nina Jablonski's research specifically links high melanin skin and high UV environments to the preservation of folate in the body. Dark skin near the equator protects not just the person wearing it, but the next generation growing inside them. So the full picture looks like this. Your ancestors near the equator needed high melanin to block UV radiation from destroying their folate and damaging their DNA. Your ancestors further from the equator needed lower melanin to allow enough UV radiation through to produce sufficient vitamin D. The skin you were born with is the result of your lineage finding its specific equilibrium between those two pressures, calibrated over hundreds of generations to the specific sunlight levels of wherever your ancestors happen to settle and survive. Think about what that means for a moment. Every shade of human skin that exists on this planet, from the deepest brown to the palest beige, is a correct answer to a specific question. The question is always the same. How much UV radiation is available here, and how does a human body make the most of it without being destroyed by it? There is no better answer. There is no worse answer. There is only the answer that worked for the latitude your family called home for thousands of years. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The variation in human skin color that people have spent so much of recorded history attaching meaning to, building hierarchies around, using to divide and rank each other, is not a difference in kind. It is a difference in a single variable, the amount of one biological pigment, a molecule. A number your body produces more or less of depending on where your ancestors were standing when the sun came up. The full range of human skin color sits within a bandwidth of variation so narrow that, biologically speaking, we are all essentially the same shade. The differences that seem so significant to human eyes represent a tiny fraction of our actual biological variation. We are far more alike than any surface reading suggests. You were born wearing a number. It tells a story about your ancestors, about the sun, about latitude and survival, and 200,000 years of biology doing its job. That number is not your identity. It is not your destiny. It is not a rank. It is a solution, specifically yours, worked out over thousands of generations by people who had no idea they were doing it. People who were simply trying to survive long enough to pass something on to you. And here you are.